being a human being and participating in the economy means you fit a narrow stream of whether that's the degree you do or the profession you enter or the vocation you complete. Like, these are what we consider as our key drivers of economic value. And what we're seeing today is a complete shift from that, right? For those of you who have seen my post on LinkedIn, you'd see that, today, if you love cooking, you're able to start an Instagram cooking channel or a TikTok channel where you cook food, and that can then become a Channel 4 show, or it could become a recipe book. And you can see people's careers now being built off things that they actually just really enjoy doing. And we have to ask ourselves why that is. In a time where, like, if we had to ask ourselves 20 years ago, we can remember that if you wanted to become a chef, for example, your best way of becoming a chef was getting on, was it Ready Steady Cook? Was that the show with Ainsley Harriott where they used to cook and two people used to compete? Thank you for the validation. Like, this was the ways that people would sort of build their careers. Now today they just need a phone, cooking equipment, and they just go with it. So just really sort of understanding that what's changed about self-employment is, in the past it was really about thinking about hustling, right? I remember when me and Pratik first started a digital marketing agency, the way we got clients was like simply by walking up to shops that didn't have a social media presence, talking to them and convincing them to sign up for digital marketing services. Now, this idea of hustle is very similar to employment, right? We're trading time for money, that sort of simple thing of an hourly wage, unit cost being how much work we're actively able to do. Self-employment also used to involve working a lot harder. Like, if you were an accountant who was self-employed, like, it was about the number of hours you were spending, the number of clients you had, and how many people you were able to move through. And traditional self-employment really focuses on that. When we think about driving instructors, when we think about accountants, when we think about business consultants, many in the past were paid based on the number of clients and the number of hours that they work. And it often requires this constant availability. Like, running a business or being self-employed is no joke. Like, I constantly say to everyone, having a job is way easier than ever doing this. And the reason that it is way easier is because you're not constantly accountable, you're not constantly available. But how AI has changed a lot of this is we now think about self-employment through the lens of leverage. So for the first time, you can have automated customer service, you can have automated emails going out, you can have responsive emails where a large language model can analyze the emails coming into you and prioritize them based on their importance to you. When we think about this, we can see that leverage helps us to have systems that scale. And scale is like the number one thing people like. When we think about areas of the economy, like, for example, venture capital, and why they invest in specific companies and not others, it's because they want to see systems that scale. And for a normal person who's living a normal life, who just wants to make enough money so they can make ends meet, they're not thinking about scaling to billions of people. They're thinking about, how do we scale to thousands, or how do we scale to a couple hundred? That's all you really need to have a sustainable form of self-employment. And AI actually allows us to have those systems that scale to the degree which we need them to scale. It allows us to also strategically position ourselves. There used to be many barriers that people faced when it came to self-employment. So, that could be your literacy level or your ability with maths. And today you're able to find and use tools that help you to position yourself for what you're really good for. You might be an excellent carpenter, you might be an excellent bricklayer, but the use of AI can help you to then focus on what you're really good at and outsource the bits of the business or the bits of being self-employed you don't want to do. And it's why technology is a force multiplier. It allows you to have access to a proverbial accountant, a proverbial lawyer, a consultant, all at your fingertips. And I think it's us recognizing that when we have access to information in the abundance that we do, how do we use that, and how do we refine that information into what's valuable for us? I think one of the things that I find really interesting about today's time specifically is that we live in a time where, like, everything is available on the internet, right? Like, you could go and research or learn how to do anything you wanted to do. I think it's one of the things that I've shared before, but there's Olympians who've learned, I think he was a javelin thrower from Kenya, but he actually learned how to throw the javelin from watching YouTube videos and then making a makeshift javelin at home, and then actually ended up in the Olympics. And like, that goes to show you the power of technology as a force multiplier. And since the release of ChatGPT, what we've seen is more and more people across the world adopting this technology and using it in a way that ultimately systemizes their lives. So for the first time, we're seeing that if English isn't your first language, you can still have as much of a competitive advantage as someone where English is their first language through the use of AI tools, for example. And you can also automate a lot of the work that business owners or self-employed people used to find extremely tedious. By the way, if anyone has any questions or anything, feel free to throw them in the chat, or yeah, put your hands up. Feel free to. So the biggest problem people face when dealing with how to adopt AI and apply it to their self-employment journeys is really the fact that there is too many tools available. Right now, when you have too many tools to choose from, it's like social media platforms. For example, if you're a digital marketer and you're trying to choose what platform to market on, how would you go about making that choice?
So I would have thought the best way is to find out where your customers are, which social media channels they're actually using and engaging with, and focus your time and attention on those channels.
Exactly, spot on. And this is exactly how I'm going to encourage you guys to think about AI. Now, AI, of course, doesn't have people on there, so you're not going to be using AI to figure out, there's not going to be a customer base necessarily on there, but it's thinking about what's relevant to your context. That's all you do when you're choosing a social media platform. You're figuring out what is the context of the problem you're trying to solve, and you're trying to figure out what are the best tools for choosing that or solving that problem. So one of the key things is every single AI company is incentivized to acquire market share, right? Doesn't matter if you're Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, all you want to do is you want to acquire market share, and you're willing to do and say anything to do that. So they're all going to promise transformation. They're all going to promise time saved. And one of the key things to remember is like AI fundamentally promises that from, saving us from tedious work or augmenting the way we work or making things easier. But you don't need to choose the perfect tool instantly. Most of these tools are freely available, and until you're ready to commit, I would just recommend experimentation. For someone starting out on their digital marketing journey, it's just about either focusing on a single platform or experimenting on many, depending on the problem they're trying to solve. But the other area that people really struggle with AI, and I think this is more profound than other technologies, like people had this with social media, they had this with newspapers apparently, and the radio, where people thought that their brains were going to rot and we weren't going to be able to talk to each other and the whole world was going to end because everyone was going to be sitting on buses reading newspapers. With AI, this feels more profound because for the first time, when you think about the Turing test, the Turing test is whether a computer can convince a human that it's basically a human, right? And AI can pass, LLMs today pass the Turing test. And that can really scare people because then it changes this idea of what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be intelligent? So these fears are fundamentally not a great place to operate from, just because they can often make us quite avoidant to this technology. They can make us quite averse to adopting it and not using it to the full capability that is available. So, when I talk to people about how I use AI, like using AI to help sort of analyze my decision making is a really powerful way I found to use these tools. And some could argue that I remove a part of my agency by asking an AI to help me to make decisions. But in reality, like I would ask my friends for help to make decisions, and I feel more obliged to listen to a friend who's giving me advice about a decision than I do to listen to an AI, right? I'm more willing to be more transparent and quite ruthless with an AI in comparison to another human being because there's no social desirability bias. So always really critically evaluating and analyzing our fears and understanding what are we actually afraid of. And then the fear of relevance, like this, am I falling behind? I think it's 39% of the UK use AI on a daily basis for like work activities at the minute. Like it's nowhere near the adoption rates of things like social media or smartphones. So like recognizing that 3 years into this quite tumultuous time in history, like learning and being curious about these tools is definitely a positive and definitely something that you should acknowledge in yourself as that keeps you relevant. And the relevance is very much not just around your use of the tools, it's around your background, your age, like the demographic and psychographic data. We know that older people tend to be more averse to using technology. We know that women tend to use technology or work in the technology sector less in comparison to men. So we need to recognize how all of these factors play into the way we interact with these technologies. So thinking about the reframe of how we want to start to think about not only the tools that we choose, but the mindset that we have to AI. So AI, simple sort of statement there, but I think it's quite important to say, is that AI does not replace people, it replaces poorly structured work. When we think about poorly structured work, and for anyone who works in the NHS or works in GP surgeries, I apologize for my next set of comments, but for example, right, like if you're an administrator who works in a GP surgery, there's so much faff that goes into your work. For those of you who've worked in GP surgeries, you get a triaging system where, you know, you might submit a form or an inquiry about an appointment. It goes to a system, and an administrator who may not have healthcare knowledge or any healthcare training has to then decide potentially the severity of that before that's passed on to a doctor. Now, this is poorly structured work, right? Because an LLM could be used to replace the administrator and determine where that appointment should be triaged to. And this is what we talk about when we think about repeatable, automatable actions. These are simple tasks that come through a process. So the task element is you're submitting a form that goes to an administrator who decides who you're going to see. This is a great area to use automation. You know, when it comes to things like emails, summaries of emails are much more useful than reading entire emails. And this can save seconds or minutes in some case. The next bit is judgment. Now, humans are great at judgment when we have no emotions attached to what we're judging. So, for example, if I asked you to judge an external person's situation, you would find that much easier than judging something in your own life. So, for example, when we you know, for all of us who've watched shows of reality TV, it's one of the things that people love about reality TV, right? Is that if you watch reality TV, you sit there on your sofa judging the people on screen, but not recognizing how you might be in that specific circumstance. And what's really powerful about AI is it removes that emotive element to a degree. So strategic decisions, context, and nuance are more readily used by that AI model. And then you're able to reflect back whether your judgment is impaired by your emotional state or your current situations or the nuances of your own life. And the reason that this is useful is that judgment, like decision making and time, are like the two biggest determinants of like whether we live good lives, whether we're able to make money or build successful businesses. So really thinking about how AI contributes to that judgment. And then finally, identity. So identity is a weird one. Identity, I think, constantly changes for us as we grow older, as we develop through life, as we go through different situations. But the thing is that people are often really they're not very good at sort of understanding their own identities. And again, like when we think about identity, that's something that's unique to us. It's our perspective, it's our positioning in the world. But how we use these tools can actually enable us to express that identity in better ways through content or through something creative or through the self-employment activities that we want to participate in. But what we really need to remember throughout this is that if you're able to structure your work, or if you're able to recognize which parts of your work are poorly structured, you're going to be able to use AI much better. So thinking about the individual tasks involved in your self-employment activity. So for example, if you are a digital marketer, you need to automate outreach. You need to automate contracts, partnership agreements, proposal writing. You need to have a CRM that automatically might contact specific freelancers once a specific client has been added. And breaking down these tasks will help you to figure out what is the process, what is the workflow that you're trying to build. Then your judgment, and your judgment could be you know, if it's a SME client who is a tattoo shop or a barber, you only charge them £500 to £1,000 a month. But you also know that they might want to use Instagram and TikTok over other platforms. And you build this nuance and this context into the large language model you're using or into the steps behind the automations you're trying to build. But never forgetting your identity or your unique perspective and positioning. And we'll go on to why this is so important. But you know what makes businesses different, and like if you've worked in a big corporate, each corporate has its own vibe. Like for people, I hope people don't mind me using the word vibes on this call, but like the point is you as an individual and as a company or as a self-employed person, you have a vibe. There's a reason that people like going to some people other than other people. It's like to think about the freedom of choice we have in the people we follow on the internet or the people we choose to work with. Oftentimes it's because there's something about their unique perspective and positioning that we really like. And a lot of it is down to perception, and it's thinking about your perception of yourself, but also how you're perceived by the outside world. So thinking about what this looks like when we're thinking about like the modern self-employment method, right? We need to be able to think about systems. So when we think about systems, this could be government systems, this could be how an SME works, how corporate systems work. It could be how individual systems work. It doesn't matter who you're selling to, they're fundamentally a system, like they fundamentally fit within a larger system. But you need to think about this in terms of the system as opposed to like in terms of a specific person or the specific customer. And like, it's like when we think about social media, right? We know different social media, like, and we can call them systems in this case. We know that they have different audiences, different customer profiles, different types of content that, and what we need to recognize through that is that, you know, through using AI and systems together, we can contribute really well to creating content on a platform. We can contribute really well to building an automation into our CRM or helping to improve the insights we're able to gather from our CRM. You know, if you're a bid writer, for example, and you know how government procurement works, you can then use AI to help you to figure out how and what bids are released. So one really interesting use of AI at Breakthrough is we have a bid sourcing bot. So our bid writer has managed to link up government procurement APIs with LLM. So every day on Slack, we get an update with all the most recent and relevant bids to Breakthrough that then appear on government procurement portals. And this is great as a systems thinking and AI leverage. So you can see that why that would be useful, but you're probably thinking, how do we turn that into a business? So for example, that's like Breakthrough existing with all the AI, all the systems, but none of the people. Then we think about human and AI, and this is what most people are on, right? So the reason that I say most people is that most of us have human AI collaboration. Like I went to an event by Virgin I think last month, and one of the things they said is that for the first time in history, you have human and non-human intelligence occupying the same room at the same time at all times. You know, like people are in meetings transcribing and then uploading questions to ChatGPT or to Gemini mid-meeting, and then using the insights they're gathering to then influence their contribution to the meeting. This human AI collaboration is also really important, because the reason being is like we as human beings constantly might have questions to ask. We might have decisions that we want to get strategic guidance on. And it's really us thinking about, okay, how do we better collaborate with AI? And then we think about our traditional worldview, right? Which is humans and systems. Your average citizen in society, an employee in a large corporate, they're a human who knows how to navigate a system, and they might know how to navigate that system well or not well. If we were to use the Breakthrough context, this is the facilitators, the coaches, the team members that we have. Now, the thing with humans and systems is there are constraints, right? As a human being, I need to sleep. As a human being, I need to eat. I need to have social connection. I need to look after myself. There's a lot of human constraints, right? Being human, like, you know, when someone makes a mistake and it's only human or human error, like we can see the constraints of being human in this case. But what we need to recognize is the sustainable sweet spot is where we recognize all three and we start to bring them together, both in a business perspective. So how do we use humans in our systems and how do we use AI in our systems? So thinking about something like onboarding, right? If you're onboarding a new client, then how is it that the humans are involved in that and what bits could the AI do? If we wanted to think about something like an estate agent, if you were, for example, we're thinking about the entire renting a house process, what parts of that could be automated? It could be that you could have the tenancy agreement automated. You could have the documentation, the deposit taking, all of that automated. But maybe they would still want to see a human when they were visiting the house, and they might still want to negotiate the rent with a human being. So it's recognizing, where do humans play a role? Where does AI play a role? And what other systems you're working within? And every self-employed person has different systems or different ways that they're working that require both humans and that they can use AI. And I would think, like, if you can reduce this to the most basic forms of self-employment, you know, that might be the most helpful way to start. So think about someone like a hairdresser, right? A hairdresser, what bits could of being a hairdresser could AI be applied to, and what systems are they navigating within, if that makes sense? And once you're able to draw these out, you can start to create quite cool workflows or systems blueprints for what different businesses, from really small individual self-employed businesses to larger businesses, could use. And that's really that process of creating something that's irreplaceable, but also sustainable. You know, the key thing is here that AI is a form of leverage, and that's what we want to encourage you to think about when it comes to this modern self-employment model. The things that AI really does change is it turns our ability to, so from execution, it's about orchestration. So in the past, it was about just doing things. Like the more action you took, the more things you did, the greater you, like the more momentum you develop towards your goal. Now it's about understanding that you're orchestrating systems, you're orchestrating AI systems, you're orchestrating humans to work in collaboration. So thinking, where can I use bots? Where can I use humans? Where can I use the link in between them? How can AI models help the humans to do their job better? And how can humans help the AI to do their job better? And it's that cycle and that almost sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Of like, both of those entities can benefit from that orchestration process, but not necessarily execution, because you could be doing a bunch of stuff and that might not actually be pushing the sort of needle any more forward, because the reality is that by doing more things, you're not actually thinking about how to make that workflow efficient. And it's a bit of a factory line, right? Like thinking about how it might work on a bid writing process is that, you know, the bot can source the bids, but the human still needs to contribute to writing that bid in collaboration with AI. And then how do we improve the AI's ability to write bids? These are the types of questions you should be really asking yourself as someone who these two worlds together. The other thing is like prompt engineering becomes core literacy. And it's not just prompt engineering, it's being able to use low code and no code tools. Like today, you don't have to program to be able to build something technical. You know, if you wanted to create a vibe coded web app, you could do that relatively easily. And again, when I say prompt engineering becomes a core literacy, like you can teach AI to prompt AI, right? You can ask ChatGPT or Gemini or DeepSeek to write your prompt for you. And then you can use that as the prompt for your vibe coded app, for example. Thinking about workflow transformation. So now I think the goal that, for example, big tech companies want to head towards is fully automated organizations. But what we're seeing is a transition from manual to semi-automated. Every single business in your local community could be semi-automated. Every single business in society could, to a degree, be automated. Now, you know, people often say, challenge this in areas like, for example, like coaching, for example. And the reason I would say I would challenge that is that ideally a hybrid human AI process is always better. Like, you know, I get coaching and I get therapy. And like, if my therapist was to transcribe every conversation and then feed that into an LLM to derive some insights from it, that would be pretty impactful. And it would be a pretty comprehensive way of viewing someone's entire journey. But also it's that quality control over production. So with AI, we can create unlimited iterations of something. We can literally just keep creating. But how do we make sure that what we're creating is a high quality and not just AI slop? And that's a real big change, right? Because we went from an industrial revolution where, or even in the information age, it was just about volume. If you think about the YouTubers or content creators who succeeded over the last decade, a lot of them succeeded on the basis of volume. But today, quality matters far more than quantity. And it's just us remembering that when we're thinking about our workflows. And then finally, I think one of the key things, and like one of the biggest things we can see changing, and that has changed, and we've seen it in the Arab Spring, for example, is that storytelling has been amplified in a way that I think we never expected. You know, before, if you wanted to reach millions of eyes or billions of eyes, you needed to pay media outlets, TV channels, you needed to okay it with governments, and that was the only way to really amplify a story. Today, you could post one TikTok video that goes viral and suddenly you've gone from invisible to a lot of the world knowing you. And what we need to remember is like content creation at scale comes with the responsibility of just consistent voices across channels. Going back to that unique identity, that unique positioning, you as a human being in this unique blueprint that you have, you taking that and being able to amplify that through the stories that you tell is key, but also allows you to really consider your distribution. Now, real world use cases for anyone who's self-employed or just even individuals, whether you're looking for a career or you are self-employed, the key thing is recognizing like these are some of the core ways you can use AI, and I'm sure there are many more creative ways, like some of what we've shared. But content creators, so research assistant, content ideas, taking, for example, loads of content you found on the internet and finding patterns, using things like ChatGPT agent mode or Gemini's deep research function to go across the internet and figure out all the principles behind scalable content, uploading journals or stories about yourself and using that to create content. Editing workflows, for example, you can create workflows where you create one piece of content, for example, a long form blog, and then this can turn it into multiple pieces of content, but it edits it so it's relevant for multiple platforms. So, for example, you could have one blog that you're putting on Medium, but you could edit that blog into a LinkedIn post, an Instagram caption with an image, a potential video. And what this allows you to do is repurpose things with ease, which in the past would have required a human. Consultants, I don't know whether we have any consultants on the call, but if we think about what large management consultancies were used for, they were used as like proverbial experts, right? We've worked with management consultants in the past, and one of the really interesting things that we find is that most management consultants will tell you that they don't actually know what's going on. Like, they will say things like, I have to pretend that I know about cybersecurity this week. And the reality is companies pay thousands of pounds an hour for management consultants from these large companies to come in and help them with things that in reality today an LLM could help with, or an app like Gamma could create a slide deck for. Things like data analysis. If you have large sort of unstructured data sets, you could put that into a large language model and it could analyze that data and provide you with insights. It can do that with data that's just unstructured on the internet too. So it's thinking like, if you had access to a McKinsey consultant at your fingertips, what would you use them for? What would you ask them to research and analyze? And this is where creativity really comes into. And I guess this is why our next webinar on this is about creativity as an unfair advantage, is that you just have to come up with the ways that are the most relevant to you, for example. So I don't know whether anyone's heard this quote before when it comes to AI, but like, AI is PhD level intelligence, but most people don't ask PhD level questions. So what are the PhD level questions that Barry could ask to his AI in order to help? So like, one of the things that would come to my mind is if Barry, for example, you took pictures of your art, you uploaded it and you said, research for me, where are the best places to distribute these versions of, or this type of art, or this niche in art. And again, Tara, great question. And what would my audience for this type of art look like? Maybe think about people in the past who bought your art and think about what type of personas or demographics that they have, right? And then think about where they might be. Social media platforms, what social media platforms get the most traction when it comes to art related content? How do I tell Barry, feel free to write like a sort of a synopsis of your life, right? And then turn that and put that into ChatGPT and say, okay, using my life story and the artwork that I've shown you, how would you encourage me to build a business that helps to embody my unique identity, but also enables me to make my art a commercially viable business? So like, it's like really think about these questions, like think about them like you are a sort of really commercially minded McKinsey consultant. And if you are struggling to think of questions like a McKinsey consultant, then ask ChatGPT to think about questions like a McKinsey consultant for you to then ask ChatGPT, if that makes sense. So like, again, like, it's just really thinking about like, for example, in Barry's case, like that, the artwork and selling it, that's the business, is like the big overarching problem. But you could think of 100 questions that you might want answered by, by all the business geniuses of all time, if you had them in front of you for that specific scenario, and just really think about it. And that's like the simplest way you can start to think about this as a consultant. And then even client insight discovery. So once you figure out the types of people that sell your art, or the types of people that buy your art, for example, figuring out customer personas, like asking for stories about where these customers might hang out, for example, right? Because then maybe you have a pop-up shop there, or maybe you pop up outside there and you just talk to people. And it's the more context you can gather, the easier it becomes. Thank you for that, Barry, and thank you for that, Tim. Small business owners. So thinking about when it comes to like, you own a shop or you own a restaurant, the really simple ways, stuff like customer service automation. So one of the really fun ways I used to use AI before was recipe making, right? You've got 10 ingredients in your fridge, you have no idea what to make, throw them into ChatGPT, ask for some random and innovative recipes. Like, imagine what that looks like for a restaurant, like the first AI-driven restaurant where the chef makes AI-related recipes all day, every day. They've started selling wine like that in, I think it's Sainsbury's or Morrison's, but like a wine that was designed entirely by a large language model, and then they create the wine based on what the large language model says. It's this type of thinking that can really help to automate an area that might have been created, might have been in the hands of humans before, but actually becomes a competitive advantage in today's world, because that's pretty eye-catching, right? Like an AI-driven restaurant, you know, the chef makes AI-driven recipes every day. Think about things like inventory management. Amazon does this really well. What they do is in their warehouses, they're able to use all the data from people's sales to predict what products are going to be in a warehouse for next day delivery, or what should be there. And what's really intelligent about this is that people's consumer behavior can often be really predictable. Marketing campaigns, financial forecasting, for anyone who doesn't enjoy cash flows or tax, using AI to help with those areas can often be really, really useful, and something I definitely encourage as someone who also doesn't enjoy cash flows or finance much. Control and sovereignty. So thinking about control and sovereignty is really key. Like the reason sovereignty is an important statement in this is like, yes, the UK government is sovereign, but like, as I'm sure we've all seen over the last few years, governments also have their issues and struggles with sovereignty, right? And what we need to think about as individuals is, you know, when we think about our data, like this is thinking about things like the context we're placing into these machines. Now, as long as we have access to GDPR as a form of regulation, we can submit subject access requests. We can ask OpenAI or Google to delete all the data that they hold on us. Thinking about what it is you need from your data and what data you want to disclose and what you don't want to disclose. Understanding platform dependencies. So, for example, like DeepSeek isn't going to be compatible with a lot of UK government infrastructure. Now, the reason that is because it's a Chinese built app, but DeepSeek also has one of the most popular APIs when it comes to people building apps, because it's one of the cheapest AIs to use to build on. So it's just remembering, like, each of these platforms have different things that are useful and not useful, and what's useful for you. Exporting and backing up regularly. You can download data exports from ChatGPT or Gemini, and you can store these on your device. You can also download LLMs that can live on your device. The reason this is useful is if the worst case happens and OpenAI were to block your access to ChatGPT or to Gemini, you want to be able to access that data, that work, that context that you've built. Intentional tool selection. So we spoke about not over analyzing tools, but it's also remembering that, like, you need a strategy on the way you're picking tools. So like for a lot of the people who saw ChatGPT's rise, like people picked it because it was that first mover advantage. It was what everyone was talking about. It's the one that like people associated with AI the most. But today that might not make sense, right? You might be someone who uses Google Drive for everything, and you might want to use Gemini, even though ChatGPT is interoperable with Google Drive. You want to think about vendor lock-in risk. This could be the amount you have to pay, but it could also be around like them never like giving you access to your data. So one of the key things that UK government stopped certain transcription apps from actually going into calls was because once you gave permission for that transcription AI to go into one call, it could access all calls and all calendar invites, meaning it had access to way more information than it actually required. And that was part of what was in those terms and conditions. Interoperability, like you need to prioritize that. The internet right now is super fragmented. I don't know whether anyone knows much about how China approaches AI or tech, but like, you know, they have, I think it's called WeChat, and the whole system in China is interoperable. Like the government system, the corporate system, the individual, from an individual citizen to a community to a city, everything is interoperable. Now, I guess that's one of the benefits of communism, right? Is that you have a fundamentally interoperable system because it's all centralized. Now, when it comes to the Western world, our systems aren't super interoperable. We think about whether you're on Mac or whether you're on Windows or whether you're on Linux, or, you know, whether you've got OneDrive or whether you use PowerPoint or Google Slides. I don't know whether anyone here has tried to export a PowerPoint from PowerPoint to Google Slides, but it's a nightmare, and it's intentionally a nightmare. The reason it's intentionally a nightmare is because they want to lock you into their ecosystems. There's a reason that you have open source systems and closed source systems, right? Now, closed source systems exist to incentivize you to purchase and live within one ecosystem. This is really annoying when it comes to AI, because The most useful AI will be is when it can be interoperable with across the internet, across apps, across our operating systems. So just remember, like when you're using this interoperability, you're thinking about it, it's like for us at Breakthrough, we have Gemini and we have ChatGPT. Both are connected to our Google Drives. Both are connected to our HubSpot, our emails, our Google Calendar. This allows interoperability, but we do run into issues. For example, when we've built a presentation deck on Gamma and then exporting it to Google Slides, and we still have inefficiencies. For example, it doesn't matter who's built the presentation, you might need to go on there and actually format everything because everything's a mess. So just really think about that intentional tool selection. Finally, platform independence. Own your distribution and diversify your distribution. These things are key. One of the things I encourage is building a brand around your name. Like if you want to think about some of the more successful people of our time, right? Like KSI, obviously not his real name, but KSI's entire brand is built around KSI. Yes, he started off on YouTube, but now he's a rapper, a boxer, I think a filmmaker, a bunch of other things. Now, is like he's basically understood that you can build an audience around yourself. You can use social media to do that. You can use your local community to do that. You can use just your work, your reputation. You know, humans have been building audiences far before social media, right? Like there's people who used to stand in a theater in sort of like an ancient Rome, what do you call it? What do you call it? Like where everyone used to stand there and watch someone in the middle of like a middle of a street. But the point being is that audiences were being built far before. Tim, were you going to correct? Give me the answer. Auditorium, thank you. I was thinking less auditorium, more like, you know, on like the street where like you get that random guy standing on like a box shouting about things. But yeah, like a soapbox, yeah, something like that. But like, yeah, but building audiences far before audiences were a thing. But just remembering, like, or build audiences you control. So this means that if you get struck off a platform, you are not sitting there reeling that you've lost your entire career or you've lost your entire access to everything. And this is why, and it's like when you say control, it's obviously a weird word. We're not trying to control any audiences, but diversifying it and owning your customer relationships. So knowing who your customers are, talking to them, building relationships, finding ways for them to connect with you. I think a really interesting quote I remember reading, got the guy who wrote it, but he said like it was like 11 hours of content is required for an audience or a customer to feel familiar with you, if that makes sense. So like thinking about like, how do you get people familiar with you through those customer relationships is a key bit of how you maintain your distribution regardless of what platform you're on. Key things to avoid. So do not collect AI platforms. Like this has been something that I've seen people do. It's like you can use too many platforms and just end up inundated, and this can then lead you to just not using any or using the one that you started off using. Like think about what you want to use it for, use it for that for a bit, then assess and compare against something else. Like if it's like cars, right? You're not going to buy 10 cars in one go or test drive. I mean, you might test drive 10 cars, but you're going to buy 10 cars in one go. And analysis paralysis for excessive options. Don't explore every option unless it's relevant to you. Thinking about when you're automating chaos. Now, again, breakthrough thing. I'll give you an honest breakthrough example. Like at Breakthrough, we try to automate a lot of things, but sometimes things can be chaos. And when we try to automate chaos, we create more chaos. And I just want to really emphasize that from firsthand learning. Like using AI to speed up broken processes will only break the processes more, because when you're feeding in like poor context, very unstructured data, just a mess, and then you're expecting a computer to be able to fix the mess for you, it's just not going to happen. It's one of the biggest issues that large corporates and government are having with adopting AI is like, how do you mitigate for the fact that for the last 50 years, people have been filling out forms differently and not actually doing things the way they're meant to be doing, and just being able to get through things because the guy after them was able to pick it up and just understand what they were doing. And this idea of technical debt is massive. Like the more we try to automate processes that are broken or chaotic, the more technical debt that we create, and the less people are able to actually understand what's going on. And that's the thing, you want people across your organization to be able to pick up when things are broken, or as a self-employed person, for you to be able to pick up when things are broken. So start by automating or using AI for the smallest possible task, and then build up from there. Losing your voice, again, another massive one, right? Don't over rely on generic AI outputs. Really contextualize it. Some cheat codes you can use to not get generic AI outputs. Upload your writing. For example, if you've ever written any long form content, blogs, books, anything, upload all of that to your AI model. Ask it to understand the way you write. Write to the AI model and ask it to capture your tone. If you don't enjoy writing, talk to it. Just talk to it for a bit and see how you're able to communicate what you're saying and what you want to say and how you want to come across. Commoditize positioning and messaging. Now, this is a bit of a misdemeanor because, like, yes, you don't want to become super generic and super commodified, but repetition makes permanent. Like, the way you're going to drill something into someone's brain is by repeating it to them in 99 different ways. And sometimes when you're marketing, that can often feel really like weird, because the one thing you've got to remember is you see your content every day. So you will always cringe at your content. Your audience only see your content, say 1 in 10, 1 in 20 times. So while you may have thought, I've said this thing enough, it's nowhere near enough. Like, you've just got to think, like, I don't know, McDonald's or like Apple or whoever, when they run their ads, they run their ads. You cannot escape their ads. And like, eventually it becomes embedded in your brain. Like, I'm sure the Jet2 holidays thing, people probably know at the minute, and the Jet2 holidays thing, like, is literally in every single person's brain. So just thinking about what makes you distinctive and how do you repeat and embed that in people's minds. Fewer tools. So thinking about this year and what we really want you guys to focus on this year and sort of moving forward as well is like fewer tools and better systems. So thinking about 3 to 5 core platforms. If you want ideas, feel free to drop me a message or drop one of the team the message, and we're happy to help, give you some ideas. Let us know the problem you're solving, and we can give you some guidance on that. Clear positioning. You know, we talk about storytelling, purpose-built brands. We talk about this a lot at Breakthrough. And one of the things that sorry, I'm reading your message, Harry. Does this webinar touch on how some people don't have the resources that like sounds and can get started building AI apps? Yeah, you should be able to do that through vibe coding relatively easily. Lovable, NAN. I don't know if you give me some more context, Harry, on the type of app you want to build, it might help to provide you some like deeper context on it. But clear positioning. So thinking about what your unique value is in an AI saturated market. The one thing I've always said is like AI will be able to replace a lot of forms of human labor. It will not be able to replace human connection. How do you connect with the market? And I remember I had a manager say this to me. It's like, it's not about what you like, it's about what the market likes. So what does the market like and how does your unique value communicate that? AI as amplification. So thinking about you as the fundamental product. Again, I don't know how people feel about the statement, but like Naval Ravikant in his book says, productize yourself. So this idea that like you as an individual are a product, you exist as a product. So if you exist as a product, how does AI amplify that product? So the things that you're interested in, the things that you're good at, the things that provide economic value that you do, how do you bring that together in a way that amplifies it? And it's not to replace your identity, right? It's to so that you're able to essentially have not a free workforce, but a cheap workforce, a £20 a month workforce, as opposed to one that requires you to pay London living wage. Your 3-part action framework. So what I want you guys to do and take away from this is, first of all, audit your current work, tasks versus judgment versus identity, slap them into different buckets, right? Map your current workflows and bottlenecks. Again, for example, I'm going to use Barry's example of artwork, right? Like his current bottlenecks might be who to reach out to, or it might be how does he build an e-commerce site that sells his artwork, or what platform to join, right? Now, thinking about all of these things, again, is key. So like all of those workflows versus bottlenecks, and then how can he use AI automation in different areas, and then finding those opportunities. So whether that's in research, or whether that's in outreach, or whether that's in just posting on social media. Choosing your stack, like again, the small projects thing is so key here. Using AI for something basic like creating an email automation where you get an email update about I don't know what was going on in the news that week is far more useful than trying to solve your entire customer success journey in one go. So really think about how you're building that system and start from the smallest possible point. Really start to plant those seeds. And then finally, protect your sovereignty. So data ownership and portability, thinking about how you own your data, but also where you want to keep that data and how you move it around. Platform independent assets, intellectual property is a big one here. So thinking about what is the intellectual property you want to own, what are the platform independent assets you want to own, whether that is a business, a brand, IP, and thinking about what your distinctive voice is. So your distinctive voice is your unique voice story that you're putting out in the world. And like the key thing to remember is like in the past, like leverage was very much about capital, right? Leverage was very much about who had the most power, who had the most influence, who had the most capital. Today, we're seeing billion-dollar companies being built by one person, one or two people. Like, I think Lovable's one or two people, but yeah, there's a load of companies that have come out now that are solo entrepreneurs. Sam Altman's basically one of his predictions is that in our generation, we will see the rise of these like mega corporations that were just 1 to 5 people. And it's because like this idea of conscious designing. So like design just means, does what you're doing serve a function? And being conscious of it is being conscious of the fact that when you can do things as quickly as possible, how do you do things in an intentional and mindful way? Like today, for example, if we wanted to create, I'll give you something that's a bit crazy, like conscious designers, right? The thought of it. So there was like a reason, I don't know that anyone's seen this article, but it's a really random left field topic, but I guess it is on self-employment. So there's like a guy in Sri Lanka who's made 300,000, I think it is, using AI to automate Reform UK adverts and then throw them on the internet, right? And like, so basically he's like done it on Facebook, and like he's basically got entire YouTube channels of and again, the reason I'm saying this, we're going to get to the conscious design point, I promise, but the point being is that he's made entire Facebook channels, Facebook pages using AI content that's anti-migrant content from Sri Lanka that's targeting UK citizens and then earning revenue off the back of this. Now, the reason that I say the future belongs to conscious designers is he's seen a niche in the market for anti-migrant content. He's seen a really simple way to automate it, which is using Google's video, VO3 and Sora. And then what he's done is automated the process of uploading in a country where, for anyone who sort of doesn't know Sri Lanka's economic situation, but like £1 is 300 rupees. Like it's ridiculously inflated currency. It's a really like sort of stuck economy at the minute. And but the point being is like, again, like thinking about this in a UK context for Sri Lanka, but it's quite genius when you think about his ability to do it. Maybe unethical, quite problematic, but genius in the sense that he's really consciously designed a content workflow that does something quite simple with really outsized consequences. So thinking about like, how do you do this with all the tools that are available? How do you build workflows and systems that enable you to do what you care about? For example, for Barry, making his art, continuing to make his art, but using AI to sell his art, using AI to communicate the value to the world and to find the solutions to the problems that he yet hasn't. And it's one of the things that I really want you guys to take away from this is, how do you begin to really consciously design your self-employment journeys? Key takeaways before we go on to a short discussion. But AI replaces poorly structured work, not well-positioned people. Success requires human value, AI leverage, and systems thinking. One without the other doesn't work. And focus on orchestration skills, not just execution. Think about the world as a system. Again, going back to the Sri Lankan guy who's created anti-migrant AI content. Like he's thought about the system, right? He's thought about the fact that the UK, the US, these countries are headed down in a certain direction. And he's thought, how do I contribute to this? Or how do I maximize and leverage this for my economic gain? And then he's gone and he's orchestrated it. And it's like somewhat both genius and concerning simultaneously. Fewer tools, deeper mastery and clearer positioning. So don't use all the tools in the world. Like if you're using an LLM, choose an LLM unless you've got interoperability issues. Deeper mastery, meaning like your ability to use ChatGPT really, really well outsizes someone's capability of using 10 tools moderately well. And think about what your position is. This idea of sovereignty, like each of us as individuals, they should think about our data ownership and platform independence, and amplify your judgment and preserve your identity. So remember, you want to get paid for your judgment and you want to preserve your identity. Go on, Jason. I haven't heard from you all session.
Hi, Sobanan. Can you just flip back to the previous slide? You've just moved on one.
Yeah.
Thank you. I meant to mention it when the slide came up earlier on, but it's the first comment there. The AI replaces poorly structured work, not well-positioned people.
Yep.
And actually, if the work is poorly structured,
Yep.
Surely what you need to do first, rather than automate
Yep.
a pile of the proverbial, is actually restructure your work first and then automate it if it still warrants it.
Totally agree. So I think the example I used, when I don't know whether you were there in the earlier slide, but the example I used was administrators at GP surgeries, right? And like, again, when I say that's poorly structured work, I would say that I'm thinking more about the people doing the work as well as like the structure of the work, meaning the flow is almost like, I agree. I think poorly structured information environments, I totally agree in, like, if that makes sense. So where there's a lot of ambiguity, you need a human being to come in and really figure out that ambiguity and sort of figure out what the best path looks like. Where I'm thinking poorly structured is more like really high administrative tasks, or like tasks that are administrative but unstructured, for example, like the GP surgery example. But that's totally fair point as well.